This technology has been out since 2001, so quite an extensive, long period of time. And actually, the slide needs to be updated. There's over 3,000 Sage customers that have this technology, over 10,000 concurrent uses being used at any one time across the U.S. and actually across the world. We feel like the reason that people adopt this technology is that it's easy to set up, learn, and use because it leverages your knowledge and experience with Excel. Jenny, I hear some noise. I don't know if everybody's muted, so I don't know if you heard that as well. So anyway, I can disregard it. I just don't want to bother other people. When we use this technology, because it's bi-directional, and you'll understand what that means as I demonstrate it, you can not only extend your reporting and analytics and business intelligence, but you can drive work process automation, and you can more effectively impact how you manage your information, your data. So I'll hit upon a few of these things. As a matter of fact, recently I was in the airport and talking with a cybersecurity person who, when they learned about what this technology does, was excited because if people mirrored their information, their Sage information in Excel, even if your information was held hostage, you'd still have it in a useful format, being in an Excel workbook as opposed to, whatever your other technology is, in this case, Sage 300 Construction Real Estate. So this kind of technology gives you the ability to use your information in a lot of useful ways, and it's pretty resistant to, in situations like that, your information being held hostage. So it's all about saving you time. So we're going to keep proceeding through the presentation here. This slide showcases that there are 3 products in the Office Connector product suite. The query technology, it draws information into Excel. So this is different than, if you're not familiar with this, the concept of pushing data into Excel. If you took an inquiry in Sage, you could send it to Excel and it would appear in Excel, but it would be static. You could use that information, but if you wanted updated information, you'd have to repeat that process. This is completely the opposite. You're in Excel connecting to your Sage data. So in the example you see behind there, it's an example of a project cost forecast workbook. So it has a format, and the format will be preserved as and when you refresh your information. So that's one of the benefits, is that you can utilize the presentation quality of Excel and navigate, have formulas and graphs and charts. And anytime you want your Sage information updated, it's as simple as a click of a button. So that's the query capability, and we'll be demonstrating that today. And we'll also touch upon write and import. So write and import are 2 means to get information from Excel back into Sage, so you don't have to handle information more than once. So in the case of that project cost forecast workbook there, if you solicited status information from the field, like cost to complete or percent complete or something like that, there are areas inside of Sage, if you're construction centric, that you would most likely want to put your cost to complete and those kinds of things into your job costs, so that it would back up your work in progress and help in cash flow forecasting and things like this. And so rather than manually entering it in Sage and then having to run a report to make sure you did it right, this technology has the ability to put it back into Sage and honor Sage's business rules, this being Sage technology. So writing and importing put the data back in, but they're different. Writing essentially updates values the way you would if you were like setting up a job or a vendor or maintaining information. You just simply can do it very strategically. Whereas importing, it's the detail information, like accounts payable invoices or estimates for job cost or payroll time or quite a few other things. So those are the 3 major products in the Office Connector product suite. The query has an extension to it, and that's called Office Connector Financials. So the reason that technology is necessary for financials is when you do a query, when you're building a report, you're connecting to data in various tables, and then maybe you're utilizing that data in some way. But when you deal with a financial, you're deriving a value. You're not just seeing the data as it exists in your database. That's financial requires you to take values and derive what you want. So, for example, the current balance or activity for this year or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, or if your calendar year ends, let's say, and you're in December for your financials, but we're currently have January or February, and you want to run a financial for January and February, even though you haven't closed your year. You could not normally do that with the legacy financials. It's part of Sage, but you could with Office Connector financials. It can run off of future periods as well as more than the 24 periods that you see on an account. So these are the different types of products in the Office Connector product suite. To see that information in a little bit different way, these are again those same product families: query, write, and import. And this shows how they're licensed. So the query technology and write are based on concurrent use, just like your other Sage applications. If you had 2 uses of job cost, that means 2 people could be in there using it. And if a third tries to get in there, they wouldn't be able to. Someone would have to close job costs and then they could get in. And the same thing would be true about a concurrent use of a, say, query or write capability. If you had 2 concurrencies, then 2 people could be utilizing it at the same time. And if a third attempts to do so, they wouldn't be able to unless somebody released the concurrency or you acquired additional concurrencies. I'll point out that there's a designer and standard license for query and write. The designer allows you to build something, some content, Sage-centric content inside of Excel, and also refresh workbooks that have already been created, or templates, create a workbook from a template, which you'll see me do here in this presentation. A standard license only allows you to refresh. That's for the query. And the same with a write. A write designer could allow you to say, hey, I want to positively impact my human resource interaction with payroll, so I don't have to manually type things in. So you could, with a write designer, accommodate that. Whereas if you had a standard license, you'd have to use a template that was already created for you or by someone in your office who has a designer. And these are secured not only through Sage's security, the Sage's ODBC, that stands for Open Database Connectivity Security, but they're also secured based on an administrator program, so you can control who has access to which of these technologies that we're talking about here. And finally, when we talk about the kind of information that you can write, Sage secures that when it comes to the concept of write. You can't just overwrite values like job to date cost or what have you. Now, when it comes to the import capability, as I said earlier, that's creating detail entries like job cost estimates or accounts payable or accounts receivable invoices or payroll or equipment cost or what have you. Now you have that capability to import into Sage applications. It's inherent. There's programs under the tools menus. And if you have to match the correct import format, and then you don't have to manually type entries, you could get them in automatically. But you have to match the import format. What the import capability does is it creates properly formatted import files for Sage, but it allows you to work with the data in Excel the way you might want. So there's a designer license that has all the features, or individual features would be like importing an invoice to accounts payable. That's a feature. Job cost estimates is a feature. Direct cost would be a separate one. So we'll talk about all those more when we're actually showing you the technology. When we think of demonstrating the technology, we usually start first with a query designer. It was actually the first thing that was created. And the thing you're going to see when I build something from nothing is that I can evolve a report as I'm using it in steps that often are more intuitive than perhaps if you tried to learn report writing. If you try to learn Crystal, a lot of times people take a lot of different training classes and they don't master that technology. It's not necessarily intuitive, but if you're knowledgeable about Excel, then what I'm going to show you is probably going to be a lot more intuitive to you. So I'm going to be demonstrating that here in a little bit. I'm also going to demonstrate financials. So I'm going to show pulling financial information with query and talk about what you actually want on a financial. And then I'm going to create something, show you the financial functions and how they work so you can see them in action. And you'll have this PowerPoint as part of the follow-up for you when we post presentation. So at this point, I'm just going to minimize this PowerPoint, and I'm going to begin to get into using the software. Now, the first thing I want to cover in regards to Office Connector is how you would get access to the technology if you had it, it was installed. There is a launch pad that when Office Connector is installed, you would see it on any work environments, like on a workstation or on a remote server. That's what I have here as a remote server. I would see the Office Connector Launchpad, and here I see a number of reports that come standard, that everybody who gets a standard license at Query would have access to these reports, assuming you have rights to that information inside of Sage. So these are all different reports that you would get. There also are write-enabled examples, and there are import examples, and here are financial examples. So these you could refresh them and utilize them with even just standard licenses. That's one way to utilize the technology. Another way would be just from inside your Sage desktop. So here I have a Sage desktop. This is mine. Yours probably looks a little bit different. But if you see here, it says Excel-based reporting. And on this tab, it shows you what are called the starter templates. These are templates that come with your Sage. Just because you have maintenance on Sage CRE, you get access to these. They're useful, but you cannot customize them. You can't change them anyway. You just could use them the way they are. But there's also this launch pad, and that's what I was just on. So this is another way to get to the launch pad. If for some reason you try to do this and you're unsuccessful, it's probably because after you installed the software, if you weren't using the technology, whoever's been maintaining your system simply hasn't been installing Office Connector. It gets installed when you install Sage, but beyond that, if you change Excel or what have you, you'd still want to maintain Office Connector's presence, and if you're not using it, your IT group probably hasn't accommodated you. But your Sage support can help you get access to it. Now I want to show you that this is one area I could add reports. So these are just Excel workbooks or templates. I can add them here, but you could also add them within an application. So let's say here I'm a user of job cost, and I'm just going to launch the whole application. And so I've got all my menus. And if you use job cost, you may not have all the same options as I have, because I have security to see everything. You'd only see the things that your security allows you to. But if you have access to the reports, under Report Manager right here, I can, if I created a new report, I can give the report a name and a group, but Office Connector is a type of report you can add to the menu. So your Office Connector workbooks can be added to your menus. And here, if you notice, if I come here to my reports, see here I have a group for Office Connector, and then this is an example of a job cost to complete workbook. So if you're familiar with miscellaneous worksheets, this is similar, but a lot more functional. So if I click this, then it's invoking the template to create a workbook. And so now I have an Excel workbook. So I'm in Excel now. And yet it's not a blank Excel document. It has values in here. And that's because the template has instructions on what to do. And if I'm going to cover this once, and then I'll probably cover it one other time, just so that you know that when you open up and generate a workbook using Office Connector, you're normally going to have a series of tabs. The Information tab will always tell you what the purpose of that workbook is, and how to use it, and what products are required in order to be successful. So this tells you right here how to use it. And if I come to the Administration tab, the way this particular report was created is I could put in parameters. So there's nothing in this workbook yet. If I come here to show you, see, there's nothing here. There's a format, but there's no data in it. And I want to refresh job-centric data into this format. with a click of a button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my project, and I'm going to pull a cutoff date. So I'm going to say, now I have sample data, you'd be using your data. But now I'm going to hit refresh. You don't have to do that. Up here under add-ins is actually where the Office Connector functionality lives within Excel when it's installed in Excel. So you see here a toolbar right here, which is the Office Connector query capability, the ability to refresh or create reports if you have a designer. Over here is the writing capability, and up here is the importing, which you'll see me demonstrate throughout here. So I could hit this refresh, and it would refresh the entire workbook, but someone would have to remember to come over here to add-ins and click that. Whereas if they're like an executive or project manager and they haven't been taught, then they might come here and say, oh, if I just click refresh, maybe that will work. And this is a Excel macro right there. So you can, with the developer tools in Excel, put in a little button, and then you can tell it when the button's selected to run a macro, and that's what's running here. So right now it's refreshing my Sage data into that format for that job. Now I have current Sage information. It's current as of just this moment. If I left my workstation and came back in a half an hour or an hour and I wanted to get refreshed data, I could come right up here and hit refresh, or I could go back to the admin tab to hit refresh. So I have a workbook and I could then utilize it. Now, when people deploy workbooks like this, sometimes they don't have that person, the user, that the workbook, generate the workbook themselves. That someone might, in this case, a forecast workbook, generate them for every project when it's new. So you have a forecast workbook for all your projects, and then the work process might be to refresh it and then protect it in Excel. So if I'm going to just cover, so this is an Excel-centric solution, so some of the things I cover, you probably know, it's just Excel. But if I right-click on a cell and I go into Format, one of the options, there's a lot of tabs, but there's a protection option. And by default, every cell in an Excel workbook is protected. It's locked, so that if you protect the workbook using Excel's protection, you can control how much the workbook could be changed. But you could unlock certain cells, and in this case, I might want to lock the amount columns, right? I want the project manager to see the data from Sage. This is current information, but I don't want them to be able to change anything. If they're going to change something, they need to put in like cost to complete, or cost at completion, or percent complete, or hours to go, or whatever it is that you folks do. And you also see a number of other things. That this is just Excel grouping right here. So if you know Excel, you may know what this is. In Excel, you can just highlight columns like so, and under data, you can go to groups. And so as I'm showing you this technology, your ability to create something like this is not your knowledge of, say, Office Connector per se, or even Sage. It's your knowledge of Excel. And Excel is probably the most widely used business-related product in the world. Millions and millions and millions of people know how to use it. A lot of content on Google to do all sorts of things. And that's really what's going to unlock what you could do with this data. All that Office Connector query in this case is doing is it's pulling the current and accurate data into these cells. And if there were any new cost codes, when I refresh, they'll just appear correctly in the right order. So I don't have to keep pushing it and manipulating it. That's gone. So in this case, I have these values. And if you've just seen this technology now for the first time, you may be asking yourself, can I insert a column and do my own formulas? Yes. I mean, it's Excel. Now, some workbooks are created, they're more sophisticated. Like in this case, a macro was used, right? Obviously, I clicked that button and this was refreshed. So a macro could format the sheet. And if that's the case, then you can't just insert a column, because when the macro runs, it will put it back to the way it was. It's on purpose by design. But a lot of people wouldn't design their workbooks with that much sophistication. It's up to you how you design your workbooks. But as we've noticed how people use Excel, we've added capability to this technology. So let's assume for a moment that I look at here at temporary utilities. I've got my my approved estimate, my commitments and cost here, and I'm looking here and saying, am I on budget or not? And maybe it all depends on my cost to complete or my percent complete. So if the cost to complete is less than the remaining estimate to spend, then I'm good. But if the cost to complete I knew it was $40,000, then I've got cost overruns here. So now, who would know that information? It's the stakeholder is probably an operational person who should be aware of these things. Finance should be aware. Work in progress reports, a surety company will want this to back up your WIP. Well, if an operational head was having different people using a workbook like this, they probably would want them to put in comments like, the reason for cost overrun, whatever. Now, the reason that this is useful is as a project progresses, you get to see how these numbers change and what the person's reasoning is as the project's ongoing, not after the fact when it's too late. So it's another way that Excel workbooks are so useful is they're collaborative. They allow people to interact and discuss and strategize. You can run your business instead of it running you. So this is an example of how this technology can be used. Now, if I added another cost code like 1010 and I refreshed, then it would occupy row 13 and all these other ones would copy down. What would happen to this typed in data? And normally in Excel, like if you use Microsoft Query, it would stay in the same row you entered it in. And that wouldn't be accurate anymore, would it? So we've added technology to keep the data on the correct row. So we've made Excel more and more powerful as it comes to Sage-based reporting and analytics. So now you kind of get an idea. So that's one example. There are other workbooks on the Launchpad, and I'll talk about those. But before I do that, I just want to create something from nothing so you get an idea of how the technology works. Now, what I used before, yep.
I'm sorry, while you're doing that, we have a quick question. Does this also work with Sage 100 Contractor?
So this presentation is on Office Connector for Sage 300 Construction and Real Estate. So is there a technology, a Sage technology that does the same thing basically the same thing for Sage 100 Contractor? And the answer is yes, there is. It's called Liberty Reports for Sage 100 Contractor. And we can give the presentation, but the workbook would look very similar, right? You could tell from if you had a formatted workbook that was done with one technology or another, you're just seeing the layout in a desirable format. It doesn't matter what technology was used to create it. It would look the same. The only thing is that the Liberty Reports does not write information back to Sage 100 Contractor yet. So it wouldn't put the values in there, saving you time. You would have to do that. And a Sage 100 Contractor person could see the value. So hopefully all the Sage 300 people can see the value that handling information more than once, it's the year 2020, for heaven's sake. Why would you do that? Why would you use Excel and then go and type something back into your ERP system if you didn't have to? Because you're ignorant. You didn't know that there was technology that would do it for you accurately. So if it's there, use it, right? But so Liberty Reports would be the technology. What I'm showing on Query, though, it's reminiscent of the technology, and we can get them a presentation on Liberty Reports. There's also Liberty Reports for Sage Estimating, the SQL version. And as I designed something here, it would work in a similar way where I can just lay things out however I want them. It doesn't write back into Sage Estimating yet, but it certainly does the reporting part. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So I'm going to build a couple of things real quick. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think to myself, what is it that I want? Okay, I think I just want a bunch of transactional detail, and then I'm going to play around with it, use my knowledge of Excel or whatever it is I'm going to do. So let's say that details in job cost, and as I think about it, I go, well, right now I've got in my mind a from date of like 1/1/2015 through 5/31/2015. Just so happens that matches my sample data. So those there's nothing in here. There's just, those are just things I typed in there. But here, right here, I want to produce these columns of data from, columns and rows of data from Sage. So how would I do that? Now, with Office Connector, you come to add-ins and you use this icon right here, this one with the, it says Query Wizard. And with Liberty Reports, it's underneath there. And we have, it would still be a wizard. It would look the same as that right there. You click it, and now it's, I pick my Sage folder. Now, Office Connector knows your Sage folders. It will show you, these are mine. Yours will be yours, whatever that would be. In Liberty Reports, you create your connection to your Sage 100 contractor database, and then it's the same thing. But anyway, so I'm going to pick this and hit OK. And now it's asking me to log in. So I'm going to put in my Sage login and password. And if I have rights to Sage, if it's a valid login and password, then I'm going to see the tables that I have that are in my database. So you're going to see those in a second here. This wizard is popping up. And these are those tables. These are the file concept that you may have been taught when you got implemented or by a consultant in report writing. And these are the individual tables. So there's all sorts of things in my database. But remember, I said I wanted job cost. So I'm going to type in JC space T, and job cost transactional data is where my data is stored. Now, if I didn't know that, and I was using another report writing, I would have to ask for help. But if you hit preview right here, it's showing you what's in your database. So there's a lot of visual confirmation with this technology to help you be successful. So I'm going to pick that folder, and now I hit next. Down here I hit next, and I'm seeing the columns. And we're giving you a lot of information. So people who use this technology will learn their database fast. Because if you've ever heard of what a key is, the key is uniquely identifies rows in a table. So this is the key to this table. And I don't want all these things on here. So I'm just going to hit the space bar to pick some columns that I want. And I used my key to go down a row, and I can say application of origin and batch, and I can use my mouse if I want. And there are similar kinds of things in Sage 100 Contractor as well, right? Different table, but anyway, I pick what I want, and that's going to be now the columns of my table. So now I'm going to hit next, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a condition. Okay, if I don't add a condition, it will try to pull all the data. So don't do that with a big table. Like job cost transactions is millions and millions and millions of rows, and you wouldn't want them all in Excel anyway. What you want is the data you're trying to work with, right? That if you wanted all the data, you'd print it out to like 10,000 sheets of paper, and that's how useful is that? I remember I've been doing this for 35 years, and I would look at these huge stacks going, how is someone successful running their business with that? But with this, you can see exactly what it is you want. So here I'm saying that I'm going to use transaction date. Transaction date is greater than or equal to not a fixed value. That's the way something like QuickBooks would handle it. You'd put in fixed values, and what it's sent to Excel, it would be in columns, but it's static, which is ridiculous by comparison. What you really want is a parameter, right? So a parameter, I'm saying the transaction date's greater than the value in this cell. So I'm going to put in B2 right there. See, the date's right there in B2. And so now I'm going to add another condition that the transaction date is less than or equal to the value in B3. And now I have a condition, and I can build pretty elaborate conditions. And you can build them and be successful. I could build them. I'm a programmer, but people who aren't can be successful with this. That's why we have so many people who use this technology. So when I hit next, I can name this. Now, in a report writer, typically you build a report. This is a transaction report. This is a whatever report. And that's it. You print it out and you look at it on a screen, or you print it out to a piece of paper. But if you want to interact with it, you put it in Excel. Well, wouldn't it be better if it was already in Excel? And and you can still print it out and look at it. But when you build this reports in Excel, people tend to have a lot of different reports. So Excel is powered by this technology is much more than just a simple little report writer. It does really anything you can imagine. So you name whatever it is. This is a query of transactions, but I'm going to do another example in a moment. And I'm going to hit finish, and now I'm going to have a result. These are the transactions, So let's say I only want to look at between February and the end of April. So no January, no May. So I'm going to say up here 2/1/2015 through 4/30/2015. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click and hit refresh, and that will refresh this worksheet right here, this query. You saw in my other example that I clicked a button and it refreshed. So if the person coming in here they don't know Office Connector, and so they don't know what to do. So if you put a button, it would be more intuitive, right? So do that. It's not hard to learn this if you invest a little bit of time. So you get the data the way you want. But let's say you want to now format this in some useful way. What can you do? It's Excel. So I'm going to come here and remove grid lines, and I'm going to make the column headings like this. I'm going to say I want to make them I'll do something like this. And maybe I come over here and I've got my formattings here. You have different ways. So how did I know to do that? It's Excel, right? This is a query right here, so I could come up here. When you build a query, it has a defined name. So here that was that last screen of the wizard gave it a name. You can select it, and I could put on a filter like over here, and that all of this format, when I refresh the data, will be preserved. But I can do more with Excel. Now, so I have all this detail. I'm going to say, well, I think I want a pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to, if you know what it is, you already know what I'm doing. This Office Connector has done its job. It'll constantly refresh this data. So now I want to use it somehow. So I insert a graph or chart, or in this case, a pivot table. So a pivot table will take that data, and now I can slice it and dice it. Like I want my categories in the columns up here, and then I want maybe my jobs in the rows. Because it's not normally laid out that way. And then in the middle here, I want the amount. So now that's a representation of that transactional data that came from Sage. And this refreshes. So when you refresh your data from using Office Connector, your pivot table is refreshed. So if you want to know what makes up something, just click it. And it shows you the detail underneath it. So that's one way. And lots of people know pivot tables. They use it like with Microsoft Query. They're okay. They're slow. But they work. But you can do a lot more with this technology. So that's a simple little thing. But let's say that's not what I wanted to do. What if what I wanted to do is I wanted to create, like, there's an auditor in my office. Like, it's year end, and you might have somebody in there and they go, I need to reconcile your job costs and your GL. And I want to do it. I don't know your system, something, whatever they think. So auditors love this technology, by the way, when they see it. So let's say here, I'm just going to build this on the fly right in front of you. So 2015 and through, you could do the same thing with Sage 100 Contractor as what I'm doing here. You just have to know your database, right? And so now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do a query, but now I'm going to do it in steps. The first thing, let's say I'm an auditor and I don't know a lot about the database. So I asked you, where are your job cost detail? And you told me it's job cost transactions. So I picked that and hit next. And I'm seeing all these columns, but what I want is the debit account, because I think your debit accounts are messed up. So I picked the debit account off your job cost transactions. Remember, there's millions and millions of rows. I don't want millions and millions of rows. I'm trying to reconcile. So I'm going to hit next, and now I'm going to add a condition, like which job cost transactions do I want? And I'm going to say, only look at the ones that have a debit account that is not equal to blank. Okay, so that's what I want. Not ones that have debit accounts. Now here, remember I told you that this is another query off of job cost transactions. So it's still off of that, but it's unique debit, account. That's what this report is. I could have any number of reports. And I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to exclude duplicate rows. So now I only have one row per debit account. Who wants millions? That's too much. I mean, and a pivot table isn't going to give me this ability, because I'm going to pull data from all over the place. So I went off the general ledger master. I want the name of the account and the current balance as of right now. That's all in general ledger. And now in job cost, I want the amount, right? That's what I want. And then for GL, I want the corresponding amounts. I'll show you that in a moment here. So how do I get this? Where is this data on the account? It's in the account record in general ledger. So instead of using a query, there's also formulas. This is something that Microsoft Query doesn't have. You can't easily do these things. I have lookup, find, count, and sum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the value, not off of job cost. It's a different table. So a common question is, can I pull data from different tables? Well, what do you think? You're watching me do it. So the answer is, I would think yes, right? Because you're seeing me do it. So GL account table, right? And then the count number is right there. So I'll say use the account number in D7. So people are successful because they can see what they need to build the report. They don't have to figure it all out in advance. If I was teaching you how to do Crystal or whatever, I'd have to tell you how to identify all the tables, and I would probably confuse you. But this, not so confusing. So I want the title and I want the current balance, right? Those are the two things. So there, I've looked those up. Now for this row, it's a different account number. See how there's a formula? That's the result of the formula. This is a Sage formula for Office Connector. If it was Liberty Reports, it would be a Liberty Reports formula looking at Sage 100 Contractor or estimating. And so now let's copy this down. If I have new accounts, they'll just add in there and these things will copy down. So that's interesting. But now I want transactional data from job cost. Now, if I had the transactional data, all of them in Excel, if you know Excel really well, you could say, well, you could use a sum if function to sum up the data in another sheet. But I don't want to pull all the data into Excel. It would take forever. So what I'm going to tell it is I'm going to click this, which says sum the data in Sage. So this product turns Sage into a bunch of tables that you can easily access from inside of Excel. So that's what we mean when we say it's Excel centric. And so it's job cost transactions is what I want. I want to sum up the amount, but there are lots and lots of transactions in job costs for all sorts of things, cost and estimates and commitments and heaven knows what. I don't want all of that. I only want it where the debit account right here is this debit account. See it right there? Debit account equals $D7. You're going to get this recording. If you had this technology or got an evaluation, you could do this right here. I'm going slow enough so you can see it. So, you know, and so that debit account's that, but I also want it for a range of dates. Because if I change my date range, I want all the data to change, you know, at least the formulas. So I'm going to add another condition that the accounting date up here is greater than or equal to the value in B3. See how it's, now I'm going to say, it's a formula. So I'm going to say $B, or not $B, $3. Now, why am I putting dollar signs in front of both? Because when I copy this formula down, I still want the from date to always be B3, and that's how you do it with Excel. And you may know that's a fixed cell reference. And I'll say that the accounting date's less than or equal to $B, $4. And what I'm showing you, I'm taking the time to show you this because the writing and importing capability, it's just like this. The function, the Excel function that's Sage-centric does more than just reporting, but to use it is exactly the same. All the technology is very intuitive when it comes to that. So here's your formulas, right? So I'm going to hit finish, and now I'm going to copy that formula down. And from now on, this report will work forever, right? So now I want, next to it, I want GL. I'm pulling data from all sorts of tables. Whatever table you need, just do it. So I'm grabbing some. Now, when it comes to Sage 300 Construction Real Estate, this technology uses Sage's ODBC driver, Open Database Connectivity driver. that was created by then Timberline, which became Sage 300 Construction Real Estate. There are some products that don't use that driver, like purchasing, inventory, and service management. But those tables are replicated in Microsoft SQL Server. So there is a version of Liberty Reports that could pull that data, so you can have it all in one sheet. But for all the other Sage tables, majority of them, you can see them all. So here I don't want job cost transactions. I want general ledger transactions, right? So I'm looking through here. I go, oh yeah, I want this table, and I want the debit and credit. Okay, those, because it's not just an amount like in job cost. It's that. Now this is Sage 300. Sage 100 would look different than this. And then again the same condition though. Account equals, see, $D7. So this, if you've never seen it, it's a lot going on. But if you use this technology, if you play around with it, it's not that hard. And then you start to learn faster and faster and faster. And that's why at conferences you'll hear people rave about what they can do. People will say if you can dream it, you can build it. So that's pretty true. It will be true for you. Your Excel skills will probably all be better than mine. Everything I know about Excel, people like you taught me. So here's these values, right? And then if I wanted, I could sum those up. How would I sum up two columns in Excel? Oh no, I just come here. You probably already know how to do that, right? So now that's the net. Right there is the net. And I'm going to copy that down. And then I'm going to say, oops, if there's a value here, maybe I want to put a conditional print that it flashes red or rings me at home. So I'm going to say that this is equal to the amount in job cost minus this. So if they're different, I want to know, right? Anywhere they're different, I want to know because I'm probably out of proof. And then I can remember that the example I had with the drill down that you can see the detail. Maybe that's what you do. So as you can see, I can build something, and this is just the tip of the iceberg of what I can build. But there's more I want to show you, right? So let me keep going because we have this is an overview of a lot of things. So there's all sorts of reports on here. Excel-based reporting can do a lot, and one of the things it can do is it can make information much more accessible to people who normally would be dependent on other people for information to do their job. So like in accounting systems, you have to know something about the accounting system to get data. So people call the controller or whatever and say, have you paid this person or that person? Well, see, this would be all your vendors right here. Let's say I'm an operational person and I want to know if we paid this one vendor. But you're not around and I need to know. So I come in here because I have a standard license of concurrent use, and I don't know their number. I don't know Sage, but I know that they have the word electric in their name, or I know part of their phone number or something. So see here, I put a value, and now when I hit refresh, it shows me that these are the ones that have electric somewhere in their name. I can find what I need, right? And then I go, oh, it's Barth Electric or whoever it is. Right? So whoever it is that you pick, and I can just toggle through, I can then see the open amount and paid. And so if I wanted to see the open, this does drill down. So this is that drill down again where it passed parameters. And I can have whatever I want. You could do the same thing for jobs, projects, for customers, for employees, whatever it is you want. You can provide this kind of way to get access to information. So Excel is really powerful, and that's the template that comes with it. There's a batch analyzer. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of these because there are recorded presentations that you can get access to that cover a lot of these. But I'm going to show you a place that if you come here to this Event One Software website, so Event One Software created this Excel-based reporting and maintains it for Sage. So if you come here to products, Liberty Reports, see that's for the Sage 100 contractor person. Oops, beg your pardon, everyone. If you come here, there's the reports that come with Sage 100 Contractor. These are the ones that come with Sage Estimating. But I'm an Office connector, so if I want to see the query, financials, write, or import reports, I just pick what I want and then choose, reports included. I'm clicking the button instead of because I'm talking, and then trying to do something at the same time. And I'm a guy, so I can't really do that very well. All right, anyway, so like, oh, look, here's a batch analyzer. What's that? I click this, it tells me what they are right there. But this screen will show you like screenshots of what it looks like. So it'll show you all your batches, and if you're in proof, that's a screenshot. It will show you like here's detail like by application if you're out of proof or what the transactions are, and then the bottom of the this sheet would have the general ledger detail, and you can see the detail for any of the applications. So it's a batch reconciliation and investigation worksheet. It was created for forensic accountants. There is something on that. You could save an Excel copy of what I just showed you, a workbook that would have any of those things in there. But I'm going to come back here because I want to talk a moment quickly about financials, like why was it created? Why is it even necessary? I'm assuming you know the legacy financials, so I'm not going to, you probably know the limitations of what it is too. But if I query, so querying, I can report on anything. So financials come out of your general ledger account table. That's what the legacy financials that you've probably been using utilizes. So let's have a look at that table real quick and see what I have access to. And then you can quickly understand why the financials would be useful. So if I look at my general ledger account table, right, here are now this is Sage 300 Construction Real Estate, Sage 100 Contractor is different. But I've got, things like all sorts of things. Like I got current balance and future balance and year ending. And I've got, so if you're in December, your year ends December, but you haven't closed your year because you don't have your closing entries, and you have January and February activity, they're in this table. You just can't report on them with the legacy financials, but you can with Office Connector financials. You'd have to follow a process to put data in another folder and close the year and all that stuff. You don't have to do any of that if you have the Office Connector financials. So this is the data on the account table. I can query it, but querying is not enough, right? What I need to do to pull it is I need to take my current balance and add my future activity 1 to it to get the activity or the balance as of January or February, right? So every formula on a financial is actually a ton of formulas. And so the legacy financials can't report on the future periods, and it can only report on 24 months that's on the account table. But there is another table in Sage that has more than two years of detail. That's your activity history table. So if you've been using Sage version 9.3 and greater, and I don't even know what's all, this is sample data, right? You will have data in your tables. There'll be data right there. I used the right capability to put data there so that I could show you guys something. So these values are there, but the legacy financials doesn't use that. But there is something that does. If you come to the financials tab, and these financials come with, if you get Office Connector Query and the Office Connector Financials extension, it's a fixed price, and it gives you the financial capability, assuming you have access to financial information, then you can have any of these reports. So I can pick my folder, and it will generate a workbook. So in this case, I'm going to have, I'm going to pick data that works with my workbook. So I can come in here and put in my period, and I can do it for a single prefix, or if you have multiple prefixes, this can combine them, consolidate them. But I can refresh the workbook, and I'll get a trial balance, a balance sheet, and a profit and loss. But I'll also be able to get into the detail, like underneath it. So if I'm looking at my trial balance, balance sheet, and profit and loss, if I see an amount, like there's your trial balance, there's your balance sheet, there's your P&L. But if I want to say, that number looks odd, there's a transaction report, but there's no data in it. But if I double click this, it pulls the detail in. So this is not a pivot table. It's only pulling the detail as you need it. So it's fast. So this is powered by Office Connector Financials. And I'm going to quickly show you what the power behind it is. But there's all sorts of financials Unquestionably, it's the most powerful technology of the Office Connector product suite, and write and import are very powerful, but this is probably more sophisticated. So I want to actually, I'm going to have to show everybody quickly my cluttered desktop. Now you'll know why. Well, it's not that bad. It has been bad before, but I want to use. Let's see here, quickly here. This is your like one chance. I don't breathe very often, so you don't get a chance to ask questions unless I'm switching something. So I'm going to come in here to this enhanced financial skeleton really quickly to just show you how this thing works. So this is typed in data, right? These are base accounts. Here's a bunch of prefixes, the year and period I want to run it for. And for whatever year and period I put in here, either it's the future or whatever, like 2020 period 1, 2, 3, I want a financial for it. So how do I do it? I come in here to add-ins, and I use this option here, the function selector, and I'm going to insert this TSGL amount function. Now, I'm not going to explain it in detail to you. I'm not going to explain it in detail to you because there are presentations that recorded, but to show you. But I'm going to say use that for my prefix. So every prefix that starts with 100, and then my base account. It works the same as the other formulas. See, I'm just putting my cell references. My fiscal year, that could be 2020, even though your year end is 2019 and you're currently in December, you could say you want to run the report for 2020 period 1 and it would work. And then for the amount types, there's a number of types and they're identified in the help there. But I'm just going to type it in for you right here. So this, I type in period activity. By typing that, I'm telling the formula what to do. I want you to derive that. That's what financials does. I can include budgets, partners, multiple data folders, whatever I want. So there's my period activity, and then I can copy it down. And actually, I have to refresh the data, and I have amounts there. And if I want balance here, right? So it's the same formula, but I just tell it the different amount type. So I'll put in balance. Oops. So see how it works? It works similar to the sum function I showed you. It's just a really, really powerful sum function, immensely powerful. Well, that's one way to do it, but let's say I want to make it easy. So this is the same thing you just saw, but remember those amount types I told you? Here they are. I could have year-to-date activity next to balance or my budget or whatever it is I want. So I just pick what I want, and see all the amounts just changed. And the reason this drop-down works is I went and typed all my amounts that the function can return. I typed them there. So I'm using data validation. But some people want to do quarterly or whatever other periods. So I can have whatever periods I want in the columns and have anything next to anything else. And then I'm just using Excel to add these values. So financials, I can have conditional logic. I can do what I want. So I just want to introduce the concept so you have a basic understanding of it. But I want to quickly hit on write and import so you have an understanding of what they are. So you get a feeling for it. Now writing allows me to update values into Sage's tables, assuming the dictionary is in Sage allows you. So the dictionary wouldn't allow me to update like job to date cost. Like this is a job table. And if I come down here to cost, these have to be backed up with my detail by entering estimates or costs or whatever. So you cannot write that. But I could set up a job. I could populate many of these values or custom fields, with the writing. So I could use this screen, but what if I want to more efficiently update things? Like I had somebody ask me, I think yesterday or the day before, all their categories, they have like thousands and thousands of categories in here, right? Well, if the category was LB for labor burden, they wanted to update their GL account. And there's like 6,500 of them, or I don't know how many. And they said, can your technology do that? And I go, well, yeah, easy, because I have Office Connector right, if you have it, so let me just hit new here real quick. So I'll just show you what I showed them. It was pretty quickly. So I'm going to just do a query like I did before, right? There's my table. Now, remember, they said they wanted job cost categories. So I'm going to come to my job cost categories. I had someone in a presentation also recently, I showed an example. They go, I just had to do that recently and it took me however long. It's like, yeah. So job extra cost code category, that's the key, right? And what I want to update, I'll put description on there. I'm going to show the cost account, okay? But I don't want all of the categories. I only want the categories if the category equals labor burden, right there. See there? So now I've got a query, and I'm just rushing so that I can give you an example of it. So they all have 505, but I don't want them to have 505. I want them to have like 5001, or maybe row by row I make a difference. Like if you were updating vendors, having people call and update vendors, there would be a whole bunch of different fields you'd update, or employees, you know, whatever it is, but it would all work the same way. So how would I get that data if I typed it in here, or let's say I just wanted to change all of them? How would I get that into Sage? I'm just going to change all of them because I'm going to show you the exact example. So I'm using the right wizard. I strongly recommend. This is very powerful, useful. You would want to control how many people have it. Like the controller should know how to use this, I think. But anyway, I'm going to modify. You can't create new categories because the dictionary doesn't allow you, but you could modify the values. So the job, see, the job is in C4, extra, C4, oops. Okay, and the category that I'm writing to is F4, right? So that's the key. I just put them, I'm reading them from right there. And then it says, what do I want to replace? These are the replaceable values. Like I could update my descriptions, but I'm just going to update the cost count. It says, what do you want to put in there? Now I could reference a cell, but I'm going to just say, put in 5001, right? And now I'm going to copy it down. And let's say there's 6,500 lines or whatever. Is that data in Sage right now? No, it's sitting here in Excel. But if I click this button, assuming I have the security to do it, it's showing me everything it's going to write. So if I hit write, it'll put it in. See, it just said, I wrote them all. And does it use the use of job cost? No. Office Center Write does not use the use of the Sage application because you're using a concurrent use of write. So if you want to efficiently maintain information, there's no more powerful technology, and most ERP systems don't have anything like that. One, they don't have, no one knew how to create it, but the second reason is, you'll see right here, it all changed there. They want you to use the uses of the product, so you have to pay them, but Sage is allowing you to work efficiently and intelligently, assuming you get the right technology. So writing is powerful, and there are lots of examples on the Launchpad that talk about it down at the bottom here, right? That these are ready to go. If you have write, you can do any of these things. Payroll, unions, employees. But importing is transactional detail, right? If I want to create invoices or estimates or whatever. So how would I get that into Sage? Well, you don't actually have to use Office Center import. If you have your data exactly in the right columns, then Sage applications can import comma-separated value files. The challenge is getting the data into the right columns and making no mistakes. Well, this will do it all for you. So let's say I had an estimate workbook. This one is an example one, but it works. And or you could just put your import functions next to your data, just like I've been doing with my other formulas. You could put the import and write functions, are, as you saw, they're just functions. So right here, I could say, I'm having this thing type all my estimate data in here. So I have an estimate worksheet, and I could say I want to create a new job, and I want to put in an estimate, or I want to reallocate my estimate, or whatever it is that I want to do. So here's a sheet, right? Here's my cover sheet. So let's say you typed all that in, and you want to get it into Sage. Should you go into job cost and manually enter it? No. Now, you cannot do this with Sage when you're a contractor. This only works with Sage 300. But what you do up here is you click this option, and it will read all your import functions in your workbook, and then you can click this button, it will create a file. It can even launch job costs that you can import it, or even do it all automatically if you had a macro. So I just wanted to touch on the different technologies, so that's what this is about, is making you aware. And then I just have a couple slides, and then we can take questions if there's time. I know I covered a lot, but the technology is very powerful, as you can see. So this slide talks about what financials does, all the things it does over the legacy financials. So it's a huge value for the amount of it costs. It's like right now, you can just running financials for January, February, March without having to do all the steps right there. If you have a project, like a workbook that you've been using and you want it designed, you can work with a consultant. Your Ethos consultants are knowledgeable of this technology. So that's step one, or there's professional services that we can partner with. Together we can go through a project scope and come up with what it would cost for you to do it, or give you one-on-one consulting. We also have training classes that are curriculum-based to learn this software. So these are 90-minute classes. If you took these classes, you would know how to use the software. If you've never seen it before, everything I showed you is like, wow. But if you have examples and can play around with it, they're not that hard. It's all Excel-based. So you can sign up for classes and begin to use it. And this is the contact information. And how did I do? I only